Also in Washington this Monday, congressional Republicans are moving full speed ahead to give the president a legislative win before the end of the year. The House is scheduled to vote on a plan to overhaul the U.S. tax system tomorrow, while the Senate is expected to vote on the final bill no later than Wednesday. That means it could be on the president's desk by the end of the week, just in time for Christmas. Joining me now to discuss is Ed O'Keefe. He's a congressional reporter for The Washington Post and CBS News contributor. Hi, Ed. Lawmakers had the weekend to read through this roughly 500-page bill. Are Republicans confident at this point in its passage?
Yes, they are. It looks as if it will pass pretty easily in the House and by a narrower margin in the Senate. Remember that John McCain is not expected to be in Washington this week. His decision to go home to Arizona to recuperate from ongoing cancer treatment is not only a signal that he believes he's going to improve, but also a signal that Republicans believe they've got the votes they need. When they only have 52 seats in the Senate and they need at least 50 to have this bill pass, it looks like they'll be able to get it up to 51 without him there. And so again, if need be, the Vice President Pence will stick around in Washington a few extra days, wait to go to the Middle East as scheduled in order to be in town not only as a potential tiebreaker, but also probably more likely to be able to announce that tally in the Senate chamber and let him be the voice that announces this significant legislative achievement. Let's no mistake that this is a big deal for the Republican Party and for a president who's in desperate need of some legislative accomplishments.
Oh, yes, I think that is very clear. But what are the major points of controversy in this final tax bill?
There have been some questions over the weekend about some changes that were made and how exactly they were made regarding various things related to sort of pass-through corporations and other changes that there were some reports or accusations were made to sort of enrich personally some actual senators who would be voting on this, not because it was just for them, but because they own entities that in essence would benefit from this change in tax law. They've spent the weekend strongly denying that this was something that actually had been in the works for several weeks over the course of the negotiations. But what this exposes is that this was an incredibly secretive process. Elements of this 500-page bill still not widely known, even on Capitol Hill. And undoubtedly, it's going to lead to a lot of questions about why this was rushed, what exactly was put into this, and why, who pushed for those things to be added. It could be anything from certain tax breaks for certain kinds of corporations, or the fact that certain elements were kept in to the current tax law while others were taken out. All of this to be picked apart over the next year as politicians, frankly, run for re-election.
Well, absolutely. And as you mentioned, if this bill passes, this will be the president's first big legislative win, nearly a year after taking office. But we should point out that it is very unpopular among Americans. Yes. Most Americans seem to think that it is helping the wealthy more than anyone else. So does it matter? Does a win matter, even if it's an unpopular one?
Well, to Republicans that you ask up on Capitol Hill, yes, they say, look, a win is a win. This is something that Republicans have campaigned on for generations, revamping, rewriting the tax code. They're doing it. And they argue that, look, over time, as Americans begin to realize that they are actually potentially saving money or are able to make larger, more generous deductions in some cases, that ultimately people are going to come around to this. They may not understand it or like it right now, but they'll discover that there is change for them personally. Democrats and other critics of this legislation turn around and say, no, not quite. While there may be larger standard deductions, while you may get a larger tax credit for having children, frankly, people who live in New York or New Jersey, California, Illinois, and other states that are taxed at higher rates are potentially going to see their taxes go up overall because they won't be able to deduct as much in their property taxes, their local and state property taxes. So, look, again, all of this will be flushed out in the coming months. Certainly, though, Republicans will champion this, and Democrats are going to do everything they can to raise concerns about it and criticize certain Republican incumbents, especially those in suburban swing districts across the country where Democrats think they can win next year.
How significant is it that a lot of these tax cuts are set to expire?
Well, the individual ones are for people like you and me.
Right.
For corporations, for some of the wealthiest Americans, certain tax breaks or the changes in the tax rate are permanent. Look, the reason, the basic reason is because making the individual rates temporary allows the government to not spend, to allow this bill not to cost as much as it could. There was a certain limit at which the bill had to cost in order for it to be able to pass in the Senate under what they call reconciliation. It's a special rule used for budget bills, but there's a price cap on it. And so in order to keep it below that, they had to make these certain tax cuts temporary. Republicans turn around and say, look, come 2025, when these taxes begin to expire, the tax cuts begin to expire, undoubtedly Congress is going to want to renew them because they're going to be popular. Right. We'll see. We're not fortune tellers into the future, but that's the argument they give, and that's the reason they had to do it.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you for that.
Take care.